Hi everyone, I'm Imogen from Course Report. We are a resource for researching which coding bootcamp is right for you. We have a directory of different coding schools, a blog, and interviews with founders, instructors, and students, all to help you work out which bootcamp you want to go to. Today, I'm speaking with Lighthouse Labs graduate Steve Graves, who's going to tell us a bit about his background and demo one of his final projects for us. He's going to share his screen with us so we can see exactly how it works and how he built it. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Looking forward to it.
So Steve, maybe we could start and you can tell us a bit about your sort of career and education background and how your path led you to want to go to Lighthouse Labs.
Definitely. So yeah, just to take it back probably about 10 years, had some involvement building websites, first kind of on my own. A lot of this stuff was just through WordPress, so a lot of design, thinking about kind of the user experience, but nothing really too coding intensive. But that was kind of my interest, or where it at least started. From there, I worked in advertising and on the side of UX and research, primarily, and just helping advertising agencies kind of come into the digital age. So really, in a lot of ways, just working with clients that kind of had these pre-existing notions about digital, what it was able to do, and working with them to kind of build interesting things. So that was kind of where my interest primarily started at, more as a theoretical level, I guess, in the sense that I wasn't actually building anything. So yeah, I've done that for about 10 years in various sort of capacities, with the most recent professional experience working as a product strategist, which I would just best describe as somewhere between a product manager and a product owner. So kind of conceptualizing what that product would do, how it would be built, those kind of functional aspects of it, but not actually doing the coding piece of it. So I think where kind of my interest became apparent is that I had a lot of ideas, I just didn't know how to necessarily do them. So that was kind of what the impetus for me deciding that I wanted to actually expand my kind of skill set and learn how to actually develop and build things. So then started looking into various courses. Lighthouse had a great reputation, everything online. The alumni really definitely spoke highly of it. So that was kind of why I decided to take the plunge and do bootcamp.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And I'm interested, you said you did a little bit of research. Did you consider any other boot camps or online courses or anything like that before you settled on Lighthouse Labs?
I did, in terms of what was available to me and kind of what I was looking to do. I think based off that research, I don't really necessarily, I don't know if I should name anybody, because just that the perception that I had when looking into some of the competitors, that it was a lot more kind of about their brand, who they were, and less maybe about the alumni experience. And that was what I was really looking for, is kind of that job placement outlet. Obviously, a lot of them really tout their placement rates, but I think for me, the quality of education in terms of what I was looking for, Lighthouse seemed to definitely check those boxes versus other ones that seem to be a little bit more heavy on the branding piece to it, I guess. I don't know if it's necessarily fair, but certainly Lighthouse, in terms of any of the research that I had done, everyone, highly recommended it. And, through various forums and certainly on Reddit, there was a lot of talk, and never really had the chance to connect directly with an alumni, because I kind of plunged into it with some short notice when I decided to actually do it. But yeah, that was kind of my take, is that the alumni support and the career placement services were very high, in addition to the quality of education, which was immersive, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more. But yeah, that was kind of my decision process, is that everyone really spoke highly of it being a really good, comprehensive learning experience, plus that job placement component.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And then once you decided on Lighthouse Labs, what was the application and interview process like for that?
So the initial was just an online interview, or actually I came in just to get a kind of a brief overview of what the facilities look like, what to expect, and then from there decided that it was something that I wanted to actually do. So I applied online, and then had an interview set up where I would come in, kind of a behavioral component to it. And then there was a coding aptitude, which I didn't know if I did that well on. But yeah, I apparently got through enough to have, I guess, the basics of a coding brain, so to speak. So it was just a lot of kind of logic and testing. So yeah, I went through that process, and then and right into the kind of prep course work that was a requirement of joining. So it was all pretty new to me in terms of the that coding process, but yeah, it was really intense, because usually people give at least like a month at minimum, and I was trying to do all that prep work within 2 weeks. So it was pretty full on once I made that decision and got the green light that I was accepted.
Wow. Oh, well done for getting accepted, and then for getting through all that pre-work so fast.
Thank you.
And so once you started on campus, can you tell me a bit about the people in your cohort? Like, how many people were there, and was it diverse in terms of backgrounds and gender and race and so on?
Certainly, well, for the numbers wise, I think there was, in the end, I think only 14 in our cohort. Yeah, around 14. And in terms of gender diversity, not so much. I think there was only, it was all males except for one female. So it was certainly leaning towards but I think we were kind of an anomaly in that, having seen the other cohorts. But it tends to be, I think, a little bit more leaning towards males, at least in my experience. But we only had one female in ours. I remember them saying in the very first day that these people you'd really work tightly with them, and not to say that I was skeptical, but I was curious to know how that would actually play out. But it when you kind of go through that boot camp experience of 12 hours a day, where you're spending time with people, and people are having kind of the same struggles as you really kind of connect with these people, and surprisingly, we all kind of became friends throughout this, and still stay in touch. So it was, yeah, it was definitely a trial by fire experience, but yeah, I think it ultimately just brought us kind of closer in terms of background. Pretty diverse. Some people had some experience within the technical space. A lot of kind of hobby developers who just wanted to grow their experience. But yeah, I would say pretty eclectic in terms of professional experience, but everyone kind of had an interest to do some interesting things and build interesting things, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool that you got to know everyone so well. And then what was the learning experience like at the boot camp? Like, maybe you can tell me about a typical day and the sort of teaching style.
Yeah, definitely. So when they say boot camp, they actually really mean it. I don't know why I didn't think that would be the case, but yeah, it was 12 hours a day, which was, when I made that commitment, I knew that I would be there, or as much as I could, from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, as best as I could. In terms of a typical day, what that would look like is a 2-hour lecture in the morning. And then you would have a series of assignments with access to mentors or teachers throughout if you're stuck or having troubles with anything. And then they've since changed this, I believe, but then they would have a breakout session later on into the afternoon where you would be able to kind of learn some other topics. And one of the things that the way that it was taught was this kind of flipped classroom model where you would kind of be thrown into it, a lot of self-directed learning. So it was pretty intense. I mean, I certainly had some coding dreams, pretty recurrent, in the amount that I was learning. So I'd just get home, my brain would be absolutely so full of things that, every night, probably around 2 in the morning, I'd be waking up just thinking about, or dreaming about code. But yeah, that was pretty much the day to day, is that there was a series of exercises that you kind of had to get through. And then obviously if you need that mentor support, you would have access to it. Those were the typical days. And then interspersed through there, where there would be various projects where you would kind of team up with people. Some of them were just solo, but certainly near the end where you would you work with a team to kind of build something. So so yeah, it was diverse and interesting. Obviously, there was some career prep as well within speckled throughout. So that was involving things like prepping for technical interviews, how to do whiteboarding, the types of questions that you'd be expected to answer, resumes for developers. So it was every day was kind of something new and interesting and exciting, I guess. If didn't feel maybe necessarily exciting every day. Some of it felt like it was pretty intense, especially for somebody like myself that didn't really have that coding background. But nonetheless, you just learn a lot by virtue of just forcing yourself to get through all these exercises.
Wow, yeah, that sounds really intense.
In a good way.
That's good. I'll get to your favorite project in a minute, but can you tell me just in general about the sort of projects you built at Lighthouse Labs?
Yeah, certainly. So the midterm project which was our first kind of group project. They selected the teams for us, so we got paired up. I don't know necessarily the criteria, but yeah, that project was we could select from, I think, 3 or 4 projects. We had selected one that was kind of like almost a Pinterest clone. So it allows you to kind of save resources through that you find, and then to create these boards and share them. So that was the initial one. Then we did on the front end with WebSockets, created kind of a chat application using React on the front end, which was also interesting. And then, kind of various projects throughout that were involving just kind of different technologies that we were learning at the time. And then the final project, which we had about 2 weeks to work on, which we got to then select our team, and through kind of consultation with the mentors and the teachers here, helped us kind of refine the idea and build it out. And that was not necessarily the most intense, but the most interesting component of it is to actually apply the things that you've been learning and to build something of your own vision.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's cool. You got to work on a few different ones. Maybe you can share your screen now and show me your favorite project.
Yeah, definitely. Let me just figure out how to do that. Share. There we go. Okay, so yeah, the screen in front of you, you see it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so just to give kind of some background on this project is this was actually an idea that I had for a while. Didn't know if I was able to build it or if it would be even possible to get the access to the data that we required. And essentially, I was lucky enough to be teamed up. They actually asked me, but it was great for me because they're 2 very talented back-end developers who were able to bring this idea to life. So essentially what you're looking at, and this is hotspots, and just to my involvement, at least on the project, was very much on the front end. So I did all the kind of UX and did the front end development. Well, those two, the people that I had teamed up with, Bobby and Nick, took care of the back end. So effectively what you're looking at is Vancouver's hottest spots. And basically what this is doing right now is pulling in live data from Google Places. So I'm sure as you Google the place, you know that have that little bar score in terms of is it busy right now, is it busier than normal. So what it's doing is pulling that data in. So taking a snapshot right now of kind of what's the busiest places, and then the hotspot score that you see there is also weighted into the total reviews for both Yelp and Google. And then so it's essentially showing you what's the most popular places in Vancouver right now. So you can see kind of a lot of lunch spots. But where things I think get the most interesting is within the map component here. So this is all of Vancouver, and what we've done is overlaid basically, let's turn this off here. So what you can see here is these are all kind of the hottest spots in Vancouver specific to restaurants, bars, and pubs. And where I think it gets particularly interesting is if you actually go to a certain day. So we'll just go to let's say Saturday night. And then if you adjust the time, you can kind of see it's really interesting. The data tells a really cool story. So as you kind of progress through the night, so on to 10 p.m., You can start seeing that some places start getting cooler. I don't know how many viewers are familiar with Vancouver, but as places begin to close down, things begin to concentrate much more into the downtown area. And then at 3 a.m., the busiest and most ranked hotspots would be the bars in the downtown area. So basically, the idea here is that we wanted to be able to understand kind of at a high level, given that we only had 2 weeks to really build this, some interesting points with data and to be able to play with those. And then on the side here, what we have, and I'll just maybe change the time so it's a little bit more relevant. Turn these guys on. So you can go, depending on what neighborhood you'd like to choose, the date that you'd want to choose, knowing which kind of is the hottest place. So we go here, this Cloud Club. We got some more images. It looks interesting. So you can then add it to your list, which is then populated on the right. And the idea here is that if someone was from out of town, they were coming to Vancouver, they kind of wanted to plan out their trips, they could potentially save this list. And then what we've got here as well is once you've kind of added a few different places that you want to check out, then you go down here and it generates your plan. And then it shows you kind of the recommended time, which is its busiest, which is interesting because every time we talk to this idea with anybody, they always want to know when the not busiest time would be. So effectively, we've got here your night stats, when you'd want to go to each of these places, and then also your kind of hotspot score, which is showing you just a graph of when these particular places get busy or start to die down. So this was essentially the idea that we had. We were able to execute it. Certainly some more things we would have done had we had more time. But within the 2 weeks here, we were pretty happy. If anything, I was actually having to take out features and formats, or take out features that have been built on the back end, only because the guys that I were working with were so quick to be able to implement things that we didn't actually able to see it in its true form. So yeah, that's Hotspots. It's got a lot of data and interesting things, and one of the pieces to it, though, I should point out, is that the APIs that we're actually using, in particular the busy scores that Google has, aren't actually public. So we had to employ a web scraper. Someone had built it on GitHub, Python web scraper, to actually pull that data. So in terms of scalability of this to go to other cities, there might be some flags raised through Google if we were making a lot of data calls, but I think we're kind of under the radar right now. We're not extensively pulling too much, but yeah, that's Hotspots in a nutshell.
Well, nice work. It looks beautiful, and it looks like it really works, which is awesome. Like,
it does work right now. So I don't know if we'll get into it in after. What had happened is, so one of the ideas here is that we wanted to really have something that would present well, knowing that we were going to be presenting to potential employers. So we built this thing to be able to kind of tell the story. What had happened is during that presentation, one of the people in the audience who I had the pleasure to talk to beforehand, actually unknown to me at the time, had recorded all three of us in our presentation and then shared that with their CEO. When I got home that night, I actually had a call from that guy, which it was probably 9 o'clock, and I've been networking, talking for about an hour and a half, constantly. So I was pretty exhausted, but he wanted me to call them, and then we went in in the next week to actually present this again. And I don't think we had really any expectations with it, but then we all ended up being offered a job out of it. So it worked out in the end. Amazing. But yeah, I mean, I look at this and see so many things that I want to improve and things that we wanted to implement. And, if anyone's watching, I think it's, I can follow up here. You can put the URL in the interview. It should be live. I don't know for forever because we're all so busy now with working where we're at. So yeah, feel free to test it out and try it out. If anyone's come to Vancouver, find those hotspots. But yeah, in terms of our personal, yeah, the priority for building this out is relatively low right now.
Well, congratulations. It looks amazing. And that's so awesome that you got job offers out of it. That's really impressive. That's super cool.
Yeah. So I mean, it was kind of not a coincidence, but it was good in that what we were dealing with in terms of that kind of data visualization, the mapping components, working with a startup called Cater, which is effectively with BC kind of being behind the times. British Columbia, we don't have ride hailing yet, although that legislation has just recently come through. So Cater is trying to get into that space with ride sharing, and then also through taxi bookings as well, and various forms of transportation. The intent there is that it's a mobility as a service product. So yeah, there's a lot of, for what we were doing, a lot of parallels that complementary in terms of the technology stack that Cater could use. So yeah, it all worked out in the end. But yeah, I was not expecting that to happen that quickly to get a job out of it, for sure.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I can totally see the crossover there would be with a company like Cater, because, you know, where is the most busy spot where people need cars? So yeah.
Completely, yeah.
That's really cool. And so when you were working on this project, did you and your team have to kind of learn any new technologies that hadn't been covered in the actual Lighthouse Labs curriculum or anything like that?
Certainly not for me specifically, but that's only because I think where my strength is more kind of on the front end and the UX components of that. One of the biggest challenges, I think, was how to integrate Python with the Ruby on Rails backend, which took us 3 or 4 days to kind of figure that piece out. So that was a big learning curve. And then in terms of the Google Map component, this was all built with React on the front end, but knowing those kind of pieces with that heat map overlay, those types of things, I think were things that we had not necessarily specifically covered. We had certainly covered the fundamentals of how APIs work and how that piece works, but I know that was a big learning curve as well, is how to kind of pull all this data in and represent it on that map there.
And then how long in total did you have to build it?
We had 2 weeks essentially to build this, 2 weeks of development time on our end. So that included kind of doing all the wireframes, doing all of the back-end architecture for the ERTs, doing all of the features that we wanted to include within there. It was pretty organic. Again, I'm really happy that, or was really lucky that the people that I was working with were very competent with being able to kind of accommodate those requests. But yeah, in total, kind of 2 weeks. One of the biggest things that I think that we, in our initial conception, it was much more basic. It was just going to be sort of a list. We didn't want to really include that map. We were kind of thinking in an MVP mindset is what would be the minimum viable, and if we had additional time. But with consultation through the mentors and the teachers, they had discussed, being able to kind of incorporate this map element only because it would be very interesting, which I completely agree with. So yeah, in total 2 weeks. Would love to make it mobile accessible. We would love to kind of build out that trip planning tool to have kind of those suggested routes between the different places, those types of things that we just didn't simply have time for. And then since graduating, have not really had any time to really build it out. But yeah, 2 weeks is where we had to build this.
Well, that's amazing what you've built in 2 weeks. I think it's awesome, and obviously it got you a job, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so far, yeah, I'm very, very grateful for hotspots. It all actually came together, definitely.
That's so cool. Cool. Yeah. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about how your job's been going, and maybe you can tell me a bit about your actual specific role and what you've been working on so far.
Yeah, definitely. So the specific role that I have is, it's in a startup, you tend to obviously wear a lot of hats. But I think on paper, probably product owner, which would be my role. When we initially had discussed, the other two guys that I was working with, they're definitely on the development coding back end. But for myself, to kind of build off the previous experience that I had, which, I'm very thankful for the Lighthouse experiences because it taught me, before I would say, okay, well, we need a house. The house has to have so many doors, so many windows. But now it's like, okay, well, I understand how, the hinges work and how the window panes and all of those kind of pieces to it. So it really helps me in terms of my current role to have that kind of background and knowledge, certainly when kind of looking at projections in terms of time and effort. So yeah, that's kind of the role that I have right now. I think personally, my strengths would be more so on the product conception and really kind of understanding the user. That's one thing that I realized going through that coding experience, is that I think that I like to meet the user. I like talking to the user. I really like kind of that interaction piece to it. So yeah, that's kind of my current role is overseeing kind of the current products that we're working on, representing the user within when decisions have to be made. And then also too, probably not my strength, but project management and really kind of managing that backlog and understanding and prioritizing what should be built and why.
Awesome. Oh, it sounds really cool. That sounds like a great job. So congratulations again.
Well, thank you. And I realize I didn't answer your question from before, but a lot of the stuff that I'm currently working on, just as we're getting prepped to introduce ride hailing, is a lot of kind of that infrastructure and that back end to be able to allow drivers, once that legislation happens and once those laws are passed, is to allow those drivers that are applying currently to drive with Cater the ability to log on to the system, understand what their routes are, and then also, managing kind of their payouts and things like that. So it's that's current kind of where the priority is, but a lot of interesting opportunity, I think, within this space for sure.
It's fascinating. Yeah, super cool. So what would your advice be to other people who are thinking about doing a coding bootcamp like Lighthouse Labs? And maybe your advice could be something to do with how to choose a project that might help them land a job.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it is just knowing, at least within that vein of, knowing that kind of that final presentation is going to be presented, to a group, is to have something that, at least within ours, that was kind of the priority for us, was to be able to kind of tell a story or an interesting way, just because people will remember that, and, to keep it kind of short, interesting. People want to know more about kind of that tech back end and how things are built. They certainly have that opportunity after the presentations are done. But I think just to capture it and really keep people interested is just making sure that whatever you're kind of building presents well. You can do certainly interesting things within the development process to, if your strength is on the back end, to implement those interesting features and talk to it. But I think, in terms of presentation for people, that people like to be somewhat entertained or learn something. So I think that was kind of where we approached this project from, is that, it would be interesting to tell that story around kind of how people move throughout the night and what are the current hot spots, and, and certainly people like food and to go out and drink. And so there was that kind of element too, which I think is just helps it present well. And even though a lot of projects that I've seen, not specifically the cohort, but, projects that have kind of passed through, technology wise, very interesting, what they're capable of doing. But, I think to kind of capture people's attention, there's got to be some sort of wow factor, I guess, in some respect.
Well done again on doing that. It's awesome that you were able to get the job with that cool project. And congrats again on the job. It sounds like it's going really well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so far it's really good. Yeah, it's in the same floor as the boot camp. So
Oh,
I
wow.
got the routine down. I just been doing it for 10 weeks. The only difference now is I get to leave a lot earlier.
Nice. Well, all the best for the future. Hope the job continues to go well. And yeah, it was great to talk with you. Thank you for sharing your story and your project.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, pleasure talking to you too.